Hey guys, Mike from MasterYourMix.com here, and in this video I want to talk about EQing vocals so that you can get that in-your-face sound and get your vocals sounding present, have the clarity, and so that they just sit right in the mix. So I've got a track loaded up here by an artist named Jem Payne, and this track is called Demons, and I love working with Jem, she's awesome. So give this track a listen, get familiar with her voice, and then I'll show you what I did with the EQ.
I could take the judgment. I can make them come around. Give me one signal. I'll start right now. Tell me your secrets. I'll tell you my one fear. You tell me you're ready. It all goes dark here. I get demons waiting. Don't open that door, whatever you do. Whatever you do.
So you get an idea of how her vocals sound there, right? Now when it comes to vocals, there's a lot of different factors that can contribute to what you're going to need to boost and cut and add to your tracks to make your vocals sit right. And depending on the tonality of the singer, the microphone you used, the placement of the singer to the microphone, the type of room that you're in, and the acoustic treatment you have, all of that stuff can have an impact on the overall clarity and sound of the vocal. But that being said, I do find that there's typically about 6 different frequency ranges that whenever I'm EQing vocals, I'm either boosting or cutting. So I want to talk to you about that in this video. So let me pull up my EQ that I used here. I've got the Waves Rec 6. I love using this EQ plugin. I use it on almost everything. And the very first thing that I tend to do is I add a high-pass filter. Now, when it comes to male vocals, usually I'll set the filter at around 80 Hertz or up to 120 Hertz, depending on the voice. And with females, usually I'll cut around 150 Hertz, because usually they have a bit of a thinner sounding voice. So, the idea behind the high-pass filter is just to get rid of any low-end junk that's there. That could be rumble from your room, it could be traffic that's outside that's making its way into the mic, it could be any low-end hum that's maybe caused by electrical stuff. There's a lot of stuff you can get rid of that isn't necessary, and when you're thinking of your voice, you don't think of a voice as being just low frequency content, right? Like you need that presence and that clarity, and that's usually in the upper frequency ranges. So get rid of that stuff, and that'll help make a little bit more clarity for your bass and your kick drums as well. The next section that I tend to look at is around the 200 to 300 Hertz range. And in this range here, this is where you get your low-end presence. And if you have a thin-sounding singer, typically you're going to want to boost this range. And the opposite, if you have a singer that has a really boomy voice, you're going to want to cut that range and thin out the vocal a little bit more. This is also where you get a little bit of the proximity effect from microphones. So if you're not familiar with the proximity effect, what that means is that when a singer is really close to a mic, especially with a cardioid mic, you tend to get a little bit of a boost of low frequencies. And so just as an example, right now, as I'm talking, I'm fairly close to the mic, but if I move closer, you start to get a little bit more of that low-end bump, right? And then as I pull back, it starts to thin out a bit. You want to eliminate any of that kind of stuff as well. So in this case here, Jem's voice isn't really a thick-sounding voice. It's not a very boomy voice, but I found that listening to the track, there was a couple spots where she got a little close to the mic and words started to get a little bit low-heavy, and I wanted to thin those out and just make things a little more consistent. So I'm going to play this track back, and I'm going to boost the frequencies that I ended up cutting so you can hear them a lot clearer.
I could take the judgment. I can make them come around. Give me one signal. I'll start right now.
So obviously I was really exaggerating those low frequencies there, but when I cut it, you can really hear it start to thin out and sound a little better and a little bit tighter as well. So yeah, just did a little bit of a cut there with 3 dB, and I used a fairly average sized Q setting. Then the next frequency range that I tend to look at is the 300 to 500 Hertz range. And this is where you start to get sounds that sound a little honky, and where things can start to sound muffled in the low mids. So let me play this, and I'll exaggerate that sound so you can hear exactly what I'm talking about.
I could take the judgment. I can make them come around.
Hear how it almost has that like kind of lo-fi telephony effect? So sometimes you're going to want to thin this area out as well, just to get rid of any of that honkiness. Now, with this particular track, I didn't hear too much of it in her voice. Let me bypass the EQ so you can hear what it sounded like first.
I could take the judgment. I can make them come around.
Where I did notice these frequencies kind of jumping out was at the beginning of each line when she kind of rolls into it. She kind of goes like, I can do it. Excuse my really bad attempt at impersonating her singing. But yeah, she kind of just rolls into it a little bit with her throat. And I noticed that that's where things started to sound a little honky and a little telephony. So just put a little bit of a cut on there, 4 dB, with a fairly average size Q setting as well. So let me play it again with the EQ out first, and then I'll bring it back in.
I could take the judgment.
That was out, and here it is.
I can make them come around. Give me one signal. I'll start right now.
And once again, I'll play it with it out in the context of the mix.
I could take the judgment. I can make them come around.
And in.
Give me one signal. I'll start right now. Tell me.
So it's fairly subtle, but I just found that it helped with certain words. Moving on from that frequency range, the next one I tend to look at is the 1 to 2.5K range. And this is where you start to get sounds that sound really nasally. The thing is, with this range here, you have to be careful with cutting EQ, because when you cut things, you start to reduce the clarity of the voice and the intelligibility of the vocals. And you want your listener to really be able to make out all of the words, right? You don't want things to sound muffled. So in this range here, I typically don't do average size or broad size Q settings. I tend to go a little more narrow and do a little bit more of a surgical cut. So let me play back the track and I'll show you which frequency I was cutting here.
I can take the judgment. I can make them come around. Give me one signal. I'll start right now.
Again, it's pretty subtle. It's just on certain words that I'm making the cut. Where she says, the line where she says, I can make them come around. At the end of the around, you can hear the nasal sound. So let's play that part.
I can make them come around.
It's just at the end there when she's getting a little breathy. That's when I started to notice it really jumping out. So I made a cut of about almost 6 dB, and I'm using a narrow Q setting at around 2.4K. So let's listen back to that with the EQ in and then with it out.
I can make them come around. I can make them come around.
It's pretty subtle, and that's mainly just because of the fact that we're using a narrow Q setting. Now, the next frequency range is definitely where you're going to hear the biggest impact, and that is around the 8K range. So in this case, it was actually a little bit higher. I went to around 9K, and in this area here, this is where you're going to get the vocal presence, and this is where you make your tracks have the clarity and feel like they're really sitting on top of your mix. So let me play it with it out first, and then I'll play it in. And I'll play it in the context of the mix.
I can make them come around. Give me one signal. I'll start right now.
And now in.
Tell me your secrets. I'll tell you my one fear. You tell me you're ready.
Out.
It all goes dark here. I get demons waiting.
And in.
Don't open that door, whatever you do.
So yeah, this is the range where things start to really jump out and start to sound a lot more present, a lot more clear, and make your vocals sit on top of your tracks a lot more. And typically in this frequency range, I will boost quite a bit, but you have to be very careful not to boost too much, because if you do boost too much, it can sound really harsh and really thin sounding. So let me show you that.
I can make them come around. Give me one signal.
So yeah, that's definitely way too airy, way too breathy sounding. So sometimes what you're going to have to do is, when you boost this range, you might find that you need a little bit more presence, and rather than just boost it on the vocal channel, what you should do is look at your other high frequency content instruments. So things such as your guitars or your cymbals, those are typically where you can maybe make minor cuts maybe with a bit of a broad Q setting. And if you make those minor cuts, it'll just make the vocals sit a little bit better in that range. So give that a shot. And then the last frequency range is usually around the 12K range. Now for this track, I thought that her voice already sounded pretty breathy, so I didn't worry about adding it. But around the 12K range is where you can introduce some breathiness and airiness to a vocal in order to make it sound a little bit more intimate. So usually what I do is I set a high shelf boost, and I'll just bring it in there until I feel like I've got that right amount of breathiness and the right amount of intimacy. So let me throw it into the mix here so you can hear what that would sound like.
I can make them come around. Give me one signal. I'll start right now. Tell me your secrets. I'll tell you my one fear. You tell me your red.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary in this track, so that's why I got rid of it. But sometimes you just need that extra little bit of presence, that extra little bit of air, just to give you some more emotion and a little bit more feel and a little bit more intimacy as well. So now I'm going to play back the track with all of the EQ bypassed, and then I'll play it with it back in so we can hear what difference all of these EQ changes made. So here it is first bypassed.
I can make them come around. Give me one signal. I'll start right now.
And back in.
Tell me your secrets. I'll tell you my one fear. You tell me your red day. It all goes dark here. I get demons waiting.
And out.
Don't open that door, whatever you do.
And back in.
Whatever you do, I get bad dreams lately.
And out.
It's all coming back to me. I get bad dreams lately. Please don't wake me. It's been.
So yeah, it makes a really big change when we add all of those different frequency boosts and cuts together. So guys, that's how you can use some EQ on vocals. Give this a shot in your own mixes. And if this is your first time hearing about MasterYourMix.com, please visit the website. It's a website dedicated to helping artists, engineers, and producers make better recordings even from home. If you check out the page, at the top of the page, I've got a link to my free copy of the Ultimate Mixing Blueprint. And that is a guide to show you some EQ and compression settings to try in your mixes. Shows you which frequencies you need to be paying attention to achieve certain results with your sounds. And it's just meant to help you get to your final destination much faster. So give that a shot, check it out, and once you download that, you'll be added to my mailing list, where every week I send out new updates with new videos and tips and tricks to try as well. Also guys, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and give this video a like and leave a comment below if you found any of this helpful, or if you have any tips of your own that you'd like to share with the viewers, or any questions that you'd like to have answered, leave those below too. So that's it guys, we'll talk soon, have a good one.